Okay, in this tutorial, you're going to build on your knowledge of both air pressure, which is shown on this weather map, Synoptic Weather Map by the isobars, and the knowledge that you've built up on how warm fronts, which is shown here, and cold fronts work and the types of weather they bring. Now, I'm looking at this particular weather map and I'm thinking about this country here that we can see underneath the synoptic weather symbols, which is Germany. And I'm just holding the cursor over this area of Germany because this is where the capital of Germany, Berlin, is. Okay. And if you were asked right now on Wednesday, 1 o'clock in the morning, which we can see the date down here, what's the weather in Berlin? Well, we would say that the isobars suggest that it's highish pressure. It's not very high, but it's high pressure. We can see an area of much higher pressure over here. What does that mean? Well, once we know we're in high pressure, we should be able to figure out that the winds travel in a clockwise direction. So in Berlin, the winds are traveling along this isobar down here. And therefore, if I was sitting in Berlin, I would notice the winds coming from the northwest, because up here is the northwest, and they're traveling down this way. So that's one aspect of the weather I'd be thinking about. Would the winds be strong? Not particularly. How do I know this? Because the isobars are far apart. Is it raining? Well, it's highish pressure, so there's unlikely to be many clouds in the sky, and there are no weather fronts over Berlin. We can see some over here, over the Netherlands, but it's unlikely to be raining. Now, what we can, however, see if we're looking at this weather map and we're sitting in Berlin is over to our west is a warm front currently sitting over the western part of Germany and the northern part of the Netherlands, which is over here. And behind that is a cold front. And we do know a couple of things. We know about the type of rain that comes with warm fronts and cold fronts. And we also know that these things generally, but not always, but generally travel from west over here to east. So these two weather fronts have been probably on Tuesday, the day before, sitting somewhere over southern England. And they've now moved westwards and they're sitting over the Netherlands. Well, let's just jump forward 24 hours to see what those two weather fronts have done. So we're going to go to Thursday. And our map has changed somewhat. Okay, we are still in this area of reasonably high pressure. So in terms of the wind direction and the wind speed, we wouldn't be changing particularly. Winds are still coming from the north in Berlin or northwest, and they're not particularly strong. What has, however, changed is we can see that this warm front, which was over here a day before, has now moved hundreds of miles across Germany and has actually passed Berlin now. So what we would know by Thursday, 1 o'clock in the morning, you can see that there, is that Berlin has experienced steady rain. Because we know that. How? Well, because a warm front is now sitting to the east of where Berlin is. The crosshair shows you where Berlin is. And if it's lying now to the east, but it was over here, it must have traveled across Berlin. And warm fronts being steady rain. Another thing that will have changed is that the air temperature will have increased, because when a warm front passes overhead, when this particular band of rain passed overhead, it actually brought behind it, that's in this area, warmer temperatures. So Berlin is currently sitting in a warm sector. Now the warm sector is this area between, I'm just highlighting it with the cursor, behind the warm front and in front of the cold front. So the temperature has increased in Berlin slightly because the warm front has passed, but it has been steadily raining. And it's likely, if I was standing in Berlin when this weather map is showing, that I will have experienced rain a few hours before as the warm front passed. I might still be getting scattered showers because that's what tends to happen between the warm front and the cold front. And I will largely, most of the sky will be covered in cloud with occasional breaks of blue sky, but it's going to be lots of scattered clouds with scattered showers. Now, what is going to happen over the next few hours or 10 to 12 hours? Well, let's just go forward in time. What we can now see is that the warm and cold front, which a day and a half ago were over here in northern Holland, have now traveled over Berlin, which sits here, and now sit over Poland. There they are. They've changed shape slightly, but they're still the same thing. I can also see that the wind direction is starting to change slightly. It's now definitely northwesterly. Actually, if you think that winds travel clockwise, actually they're coming from the southeast to Berlin right now. So there's been a complete change of weather direction. The wind speeds are still pretty low because the isobars are far apart. But what has been the big change? Well, this cold front here did pass over at some point over the night. We're at 1 o'clock on Thursday. Well, sorry, I should say mid-morning. And it will have brought a heavy downpour of rain in Berlin. That's the first thing that will have changed. So we've just experienced heavy rain. It's probably starting to clear up, although we now have another front coming in. Now, this is a front you won't have been talked about at National 5. It's called an occluded front, and it brings very heavy rain. But you won't ever see that in a National 5 exam. So let's just not concentrate on what's coming to Berlin. Let's concentrate on the cold front. So we've had heavy rain in the last few hours, and the temperature will have dropped because, unlike the air between the two fronts, which is warm in this what we call the warm sector, behind this front and actually in front of the warm front is always cold air. So this entire area that I'm tracking across is cold air. And this is actually an entire cold air mass that I'm just highlighting across the whole of this bit of Northern Europe. Whereas on the other side of the warm front and this side of the cold front and this side of the warm front is warm air. So this is a warm air mass. And you will remember that weather fronts are actually just the meeting point of two air masses. So Berlin's temperature has dropped a lot. It stopped raining probably, and it might have even cleared up temporarily. Wind direction's changed completely, and that's just because the isobars are now in a different position. So the wind is still going clockwise because it's high pressure, but it's coming from the southeast now and traveling up this way. So what I have done in this tutorial is show you quite a complicated question that sometimes appears in exams, what happens or is likely to happen in the future. So if I was over here in Moscow and you were asked what's the likely weather changes in Moscow, I'm showing you where Moscow is, well, all you've got to do is look west on your map to see what's coming, and then move all of this directly across to where you're going to be in 12 hours' time, and that should help you figure out wind direction changes and weather changes in terms of rain and temperature.